Jazeera. Israel will become a pariah over Gaza genocide, UN rights experts say. United Nations rights rapporteurs also slammed the double standards of countries that support Israel's devastating war on Gaza.
United Nations human rights experts have warned that Israel risks becoming an international pariah over its genocide in Gaza, suggesting that the country's UN membership could be called into question. On Monday, several independent UN experts decried what they said was Israel's escalating violence and rights violations in Gaza and the occupied West Bank, its disregard for international court rulings, and its verbal attacks on the UN itself. The rapporteurs, who are appointed by the UN Human Rights Council but who do not speak on behalf of the UN, also slammed Western countries' double standards in the devastating war and said Israel needed to face consequences for its actions. I agree with the UN. I think it is unavoidable for Israel to become a pariah in the face of its continuous, relentless, vilifying assault of the United Nations on top of millions of Palestinians. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Reporter on the occupied Palestinian territories, citing verbal and military attacks on UN facilities in Gaza. Should there be a consideration of its membership as part of this organization, which Israel seems to have zero respect for? The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, after more than 11 months of conflict, has also prompted questions about Western states' long-lasting political and military support for Israel, including from the United States and the United Kingdom, which both provide arms. Disgusting. Shockingly, in the face of the abyss reached in occupied Palestinian territory, most member states remained inactive at best or actively aiding and assisting Israel's criminal conduct, Albanese told a news conference in Geneva on Monday, repeating allegations of genocide. Albanese, an Italian lawyer, said she was referring to Western states as well as some Gulf nations and others. Israel denies allegations of genocide and says that it takes steps to reduce the risk of harm to civilians and that at least a third of the 41,118 Palestinians killed in Gaza were fighters. You mean men. They were men.
Men of fighting age, like 15 years and older.
Woohoo! You killed 15-year-old kids.
Israel's permanent mission to the UN in Geneva criticized Albanese after her comments. She's not fit to hold any position at the United Nations, and this has been made clear by many, it said. Albanese was joined by 3 other UN independent experts who accused Western countries of hypocrisy and double standards. For example, by being more vocal about human rights violations by Russia since its invasion of Ukraine than about Israel's actions in Gaza. I mean, they support Israel's actions. George Katrogalis, the UN Special Reporter on the promotion of democratic and equitable international order, also called for Israel to be held to the same standards as all other countries. He condemned its repeated attacks on critical UN officials or agencies. We cannot anymore stand this kind of double standards and hypocrisy, George told reporters. I hope that it is not going to continue. I trust that the progressive and democratic citizens of Israel would not let their country become a pariah like South Africa had become during the times of apartheid. The experts are among dozens of independent human rights specialists mandated by the UN to report and advise on specific themes and crises. Their views do not reflect those of the global body as a whole. They do ours.
Yeah, they say the Western countries that are supporting Israel, and they shouldn't be, like, we're supporting them with arms. Like, we're supporting them with the means to carry it out. So, like, this is, like, directly aimed at, like, us and, like, the UK and a few other countries, which is good.
Every time you pay taxes, when you go to pay taxes this year, just remember what they're putting that money towards. Not towards your schools, not towards your roads, nope, not towards your healthcare. They're supplying arms for a country to carry out a genocide. That's more important than you. Just think about that. It's an American thing to hate your country. Actually, it's American to criticize your country and its government.
The highest form of patriotism is dissent. Thomas Jefferson said that. Because when you disagree with it, try to make things better.
But they've got it so worked out so nicely to where it's just improbable. Because it would take a bunch of people to stand up at the same time, but who's got time? Everybody's too busy trying to work, and then when they're not at work, they're trying to get that little bit of their actual life, or they're too fucking tired and just sleeping, or they're going to their other job. So it's just like, we are slaves. We are corporate slaves.
Wage slaves.
Wage slaves, yes. And sucks.
Sucks being powerless.
This is from Mondowise. No, Israel does not have a right to defend itself in Gaza, but the Palestinians do. Basic morality and simple logic dictate that the right of self-defense belongs to the Palestinian people, not to their oppressor. And international law agrees. Fuck yeah. Too bad we don't recognize the international laws that we help create. I love the whole, like...
We're holier than thou. And then the next second, we're doing human rights violations right alongside everyone else.
Well, that's why you vote blue, so they don't tell you that it's happening and show you that it's happening.
It's like rainbow genocide.
They just do it behind your back.
Republicans just regular genocide. Democrats, rainbow genocide. One of the many disturbing revelations that have emerged since the current phase of genocide in Palestine began almost a year ago is the degree to which U.S. and other Western politicians are prepared to dutifully stick to their script provided by Israel and its Western lobbies, whether the script is true or not. A case in point is the often-repeated self-defense canard. After every successive war crime and crime against humanity perpetuated by Israel in its current genocidal rampage, the single most common refrain of Western government officials and the Western corporate media is that Israel has a right to defend itself. No, it does not. In fact, as a matter of international law, this is a double lie. Israel has no such right in Gaza or the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And secondly, the acts that the self-defense claims to seek to justify would be unlawful even where self-defense applies. The UN Charter, a treaty binding on all member states, codifies key rights and responsibilities of states. Among these are the duty to respect the self-determination of peoples, including the Palestinians, the duty to respect human rights, and the duty to refrain from the use of force against other states. Israel, for the 76 years of its existence, has been repeatedly in breach of these principles. A temporary exception to the prohibition on the use of force is codified in Article 51 of the UN Charter for Self-Defense from external attacks. But importantly, no such right exists where the threat emanates from inside the territory controlled by the state. This principle was affirmed by the World Court in its 2004 opinion on Israel's apartheid wall. And the court found then, and again in its 2024 opinion on the occupation, that Israel is the occupying power across the occupied Palestinian territory. Thus, Israel, as the occupying power, cannot claim self-defense as a justification for launching military attacks in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, or the Golan Heights.
Imagine like throwing a rock at somebody's face and then being like, I had a right to defend myself.
Like punch you in the mouth and it's like,
you can't hit me back.
Just like walk up to you. You can't, they didn't say anything. They don't even know you. They'll just punch you and just be like, what? I had a right to defend myself. Like, well, from what? What are you defending yourself from?
or it's not complicated. One side has all the power. They have access to their water, electricity, internet, whatever. And the other side has nothing. And they live in rubble. 15 years just to clear the rubble. And that's before they do the same thing to the West Bank.
I don't know. They did that big, they dropped those 2 big bombs and created the big craters on the tent city. That might take extra clean up. It's okay. The U.S. will help them.
Of course, Israel, from within its own territory, can lawfully repel any attacks to protect its civilians, but it cannot claim self-defense to wage war against the territories it occupies. In fact, its principal obligation is to protect the occupied population. In doing so, an occupying power can undertake essential law enforcement functions. But given that the World Court has subsequently found that Israel's occupation of the territories is itself entirely unlawful, even those functions would likely be illegitimate, except as strictly necessary to protect the occupied population and within a short timeline of withdrawal. In its most recent opinion, the court has declared that Israel's presence in the territory violates the principle of self-determination, the rule of non-acquisition of territory by force, and the human rights of the Palestinian people, and that it must quickly end its presence and compensate the Palestinian people for losses suffered. They could never...
Even if they stopped, they could never make up for what they've done.
They could never make it square, ever. I don't know how we can word that, but they could never compensate them enough. As a matter of law, every Israeli boot on the ground, every Israeli muscle, jet, or drone in Palestinian airspace, or even a single unauthorized Israeli bicycle on a Palestinian road is a breach of international law. In sum, Israel's lawful remedy for threats that it alleges emanate from the occupied territories is to end its unlawful occupation, dismantle the settlements, leave the territories, remove the siege, and fully relinquish control to the occupied Palestinian people. Here, international law is a simple reflection of common sense and universal morality. A criminal cannot take over someone's home, move in, loot its contents, imprison and brutalize the inhabitants, and then claim self-defense to murder the homeowners when they fight back.
Right?
That's a good analogy right there.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank
Sorry.
you, Mondo Wise.
Yeah, we were trying. And beyond occupied Palestine, where Israel has a right to self-defense from attacks by other states, it cannot claim the right if the attack is a response to Israeli aggression. Israel cannot attack a neighboring state and then claim self-defense if the state strikes back. To accept such an assertion would be to turn international law on its head. Thus, most assertions by Western politicians and the media that Israel has a right to self-defense are demonstrably false as a matter of international law. The second lie contained in these repeated assertions is the suggestion that a claim of self-defense justifies Israel's myriad crimes. International law does not allow a claim of self-defense to justify crimes against humanity and genocide, nor does it magically overcome the international humanitarian law imperatives of precaution, distinction, and proportionality, or the protected status of hospitals and other vital civilian installations. Yeah, they bomb schools like left and right. No.
Hospital.
Hamas. It doesn't matter. Fucking international law, dude.
Oh, we seen the TikTok about the newborn babies. It would be a shame if something happened to them, huh? Yeah, you're trying to, minimize casualties. Right.
No, they're trying to inflict the most civilian casualties they possibly can.
Yeah, that's why they have a parade. Or I'm sorry, before they had the little "Let's get the hostages back, take a deal" march, they had a "Please brutalize the hostages more."
Yeah, get the prison guards that were raping Palestinian prisoners. They rioted to get them out.
Because remember, Israel's the one that's been fucking doing that, not Palestinians.
The Palestinian claims were debunked, and the Israeli ones are documented.
And the fact that there's people running for office that still claim otherwise just proves how bought out and idiotic.
Kamala.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It just shows what money buys.
Trump doesn't even talk about that shit, but Kamala does. Like, every chance she gets, she talks about Hamas rape, and Israel has a fucking right to defend itself. Every time he asks Trump, he's just like, finish the job. That's all he says.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know what's going on.
Or he's just like, Russia?
Yeah.
I'm working on Russia.
In addition, the presence of people associated with armed resistance groups does not automatically transform a civilian location or protected structure into a legitimate military target. If it did, the common presence of Israeli soldiers in Israeli hospitals would equally render those hospitals legitimate targets. Attacking hospitals is not an act of self-defense. It is an act of murder. In systematic and large-scale cases of the crime of extermination, genocide.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how you could, justify bombing a hospital. That's literally shooting fish on a barrel.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
That's where sick and hurt people go.
And the elderly.
The claim of self-defense does not justify collective punishment. The siege of civilian population, extrajudicial executions, torture, the blocking of humanitarian aid, the targeting of children, the murder of aid workers, medical personnel, journalists, and the UN officials, all crimes perpetrated by Israel during the current phase of its genocide in Palestine, and all shamelessly followed by claims of self-defense by Israeli defenders in the West. Thus, every response of a politician or complicit corporate media voice to an Israeli crime that begins with "Israel has a right to defend itself" is at once a justification of the unjustifiable and a bald-faced lie, and it should be called out as such. Further, what you will never hear these voices utter is that Palestine has a right to defend itself, even though under international law it absolutely does. Rooted in the UN Charter and in international humanitarian and human rights law, and affirmed by a series of UN resolutions, Palestinian resistance groups have a legit right to armed resistance to free the Palestinian people from foreign occupation, colonial domination, and apartheid. And the world agrees. The UN General Assembly has declared the inalienable right of the Palestinian people and all peoples under foreign occupation and colonial domination to self-determination, national independence, territorial integrity, national unity and sovereignty without foreign interference, and has reaffirmed the legitimacy of the struggle of the peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial domination, apartheid, and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. Of course, all resistance must respect the rules of humanitarian law, including the principles of distinction to spare civilians, but Palestinians' right under international law to armed resistance against Israel is by now axiomatic. Simply put, the Palestinian people have a recognized legal right to resist Israel's occupation, apartheid, and genocide, including through armed struggle, and that since the underlying resistance is lawful, alliances, aid, and support of the Palestinians for this purpose is also lawful.
Not only lawful, it's moral.
Conversely, as Israel's occupation, apartheid, and genocide are unlawful, support to Israel in those endeavors by Western states is unlawful. Indeed, the World Court has found that all states are obliged to end any such support to Israel and to work to end Israel's occupation. And one more point in the notion of self-defense. History did not begin on October 7th, 2023. In the 1930s and 40s, Zionist colonists traveled from Europe to attack Palestinians in their homes in Palestine. No Palestinian militia traveled to Europe to attack the colonists in their homes in England, France, and Russia. Of course, Jews fleeing European persecution had every right to seek asylum in Palestine and elsewhere, but Zionists had no right to colonize the land and to dispossess the indigenous people. For more than 76 years since, Israel has attacked, brutalized, displaced, dispossessed, and murdered the indigenous Palestinian people and sought to erase them. It has ethnically cleansed hundreds of Palestinian towns and villages, stolen Palestinian homes, businesses, farms, and orchards, and destroyed Palestinian civilian infrastructure. Every Palestinian community has experienced daily assaults on dignity, arrests, beatings, torture, pillage, and murder at the hands of Israel. Survivors have been forced to live under a regime of apartheid and racial segregation, and with a systematic denial of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights in their own land. Every peaceful Palestinian effort to end the oppression and to regain the Palestinian right to self-determination through diplomatic initiatives, judicial action, peaceful protest, or organized boycotts and divestment has been met with repression or rejection, not only by Israel, but by its Western sponsors. In this context, basic morality and simple logic dictate that the right of self-defense belongs to the Palestinian people, not to their oppressor, and international law agrees. And I agree as well. Free Palestine. I wish I didn't have to take so much. I wish I didn't take meds. I wish I didn't take meds. If I have more to say.
You need to take myself.
Do
Yes.
I? Free Palestine.
I want to see Netanyahu's.
This is from Mondoweiss. Electoral politics are not the way forward for the Palestine movement. The question of how Palestine activists should engage in electoral politics has split the movement, but the 2024 election season should clarify why they are not an effective strategy for building power.
Seldom have causes defined the left within the United States like the fighting for Palestinian liberation. Palestine sits at the intersection of myriad struggles ranging from anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, anti-racism, LGBTQ plus liberation, labor justice, environmental justice, and more. The struggle, one that has been waged globally for decades, and in the United States, has remained a continuous issue across the political spectrum, an issue plagued with accusations of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and deeply ingrained chauvinism. The left has not been spared amid that contention. This is far from surprising. After all, the left in the United States is far from monolithic, nor are those who consider themselves a part of immune from the upholding of colonial rhetoric and belief systems, analytical shortcomings, chauvinism, the list goes on. This is part of what made the Palestinian liberation struggle such a clarifying one. As to be in principled solidarity with the Palestinians is to challenge the very nature of the world system we exist in a way that forces us to re-examine our belief systems, our priorities, more. It is also a struggle that has helped challenge and clarify the strategies and tactics that the left adopts. The cause of Palestinian liberation has forced reevaluations of core organizing assumptions and power building models as well as what real principled solidarity looks like. This reevaluation and the struggle of some on the left to avoid them outright has often resulted in intense friction, what some may describe as infighting and ultimately division among cohorts who are at least ostensibly on the left. And perhaps the strategic flashpoint that has arisen more than any other is what role, if any, electoral political struggle plays in the broader struggle for Palestinian liberation. This divide has, especially in recent months, exposed itself in myriad ways that continue to divide those who claim to be on the left. The 2024 primary election cycle has not been without its fair share of hotly contested races. The debate over the role of electoralism in left organizing has been central. This was seen in local races such as Jamal Bowman's effort to hold onto a seat in New York, as well, of course, in the national race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. In both cases, rather than providing a pathway to change and liberation, the prioritization of electoral efforts has been generally ineffectual and oftentimes little to show beyond hollow statements and deeply imperfect solutions. In New York's 16th Congressional District, Jamal Bowman, the former educator turned incumbent congressional squad member, faced off against AIPAC bankrolled challenger George Latimer in what became the single most expensive U.S. House primary in U.S. history. Within this race, the question of how left organizations should engage in electoral politics came to a head at one rally in the Bronx. Just days before the election, a counter-protest aimed at Speakers Bernie Sanders and AOC sparked serious discussions around Palestine and how we would hold political leaders accountable even when they claimed to be on the side of the Palestinian people. Sanders and AOC participation in the rally was met by some with excitement, but also particularly those within the orbit and membership of New York City's Within Our Lifetime, a pro-Palestinian organization that has been a major player in the Palestinian solidarity movement, with criticism and condemnation. A WOL counter-protest calling to flood the Bronx for Gaza was called to show support for Palestine and hold the same progressive politicians who came out to support Representative Bowman accountable. The resulting back and forth between WOL and supporters and others in the U.S. left, including some representing organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA, led to a flashpoint, an ugly one at times, that ranged from principled argumentation to smears levied at WOL organizers as they made a very simple demand that Representative AOC and Senator Sanders cease being campaign surrogates for Joe Biden, a key architect of the very same genocide they have claimed to oppose on many an occasion. Those criticizing WOL felt years of intensive campaign work were at risk of going up in smoke and the idea of criticizing these elected officials seemed ludicrous. Why critique only days before the election when WOL could simply wait for the results, hope that Bowman wins, and then make their move? WOL argued that they could not have timed their event at a more strategic time, as this was the moment to leverage their potential political support in exchange for specific demands on Democratic Party figures. If there was ever a time for these imperfect actors to cave under pressure, this was it, and WOL was seizing it. This analysis was lost on many supporters who chose to close rank and defend these elected officials, citing the prospect of a loss of political power within the halls of Congress, power that had been hard fought, which was, even after years of intensive work, very minimal and hardly consistently applied. In the end, electorally focused left organizers were in many instances left scratching their heads, and in condemning WOL were only further isolated from those leading the very cause so many of them had spent months claiming to care deeply about. In this case, electoral power and strategy trumped principled solidarity with the movement, and in a moment we saw the limitations of the very strategy itself, as well as the cold willingness to sideline pressuring imperfect actors for the sake of short-term victories that had no guarantee of bearing fruit. Fast forward only a few months and we saw another flashpoint, the Democratic National Convention. This one came to fruition only after months of bickering among cohorts similar to WOL and electorally focused counterparts who had begun in their own ways defending and supporting the Harris campaign. The reasoning for the support was not monolithic, but could largely be attributed to two factors. The first reason some on the left came to support Kamala Harris was the result of a debate around tactical considerations regarding the hypothetical differences between the Harris and Trump administrations. The conclusion some came to was that organizing conditions may be better with a Harris presidency and perhaps safer for marginalized communities, Palestinians included. This being even as Harris herself, an outspoken supporter of Zionism, continued to be a key player in an administration that to this point has sent over 500 arms shipments to the Zionist entity since October 7th. Disgusting. The second, and the one that arguably overlaps to a degree with the first, amounts to the projection of potential positions and movement onto a candidate running a campaign largely using a blank slate, marketing strategy that lets those observing her assume her positions even if their assumptions are ultimately incorrect. The question of Harris and the efficacy of harm reduction through voting is deserving of another piece entirely, but the argument nonetheless led to the split between different actors, organizations, and intra-organizational factions as the Palestine movement collectively approached the Democratic National Convention. Red flags, like Harris releasing a statement condemning pro-Palestine protesters in D.C. or her historic vocal support for the Zionist project, were ever present in the lead-up to the convention. But there was a vain hope among many that she may be pressured to shift her position on Palestine given the possible electoral consequences of staying course. Many hoped that she may have even seen the efforts of the uncommitted campaign, which had successfully earned delegates through their nationwide efforts, alongside the widespread national protests, positive polling around a ceasefire, and the abysmal response to Biden's actions towards Gaza, and learned from it all. Sadly, she did not. The DNC itself made the Democratic Party's position clear throughout the week, with the elevation of family members of an American Israel hostage given front and center speaking time, and the associated refusal to elevate a Palestinian speaker, the total shutting out of the uncommitted delegates, and even the removal of access and accommodations to at least one popular internet streamer who had spent time interviewing uncommitted delegates and admonishing the party over its consistent anti-Palestinian efforts.
That was Hassan.
Of course they turned Hassan away. They're like, no, don't come in here.
They invited him, then I got here.
Oh yeah, they gave him a room and everything. And then in the middle of the
I got here.
Kamala Harris's speech, the coup de grace of this reality, touched on Palestine only to offer hollow calls for a ceasefire, only after a call to release Israeli hostages. Before Harris recommitted her full-throated support for the Gaza onslaught, including the continuation of arms shipments. She finished off this brief segment with a note of Israeli atrocity propaganda, which she touted as truth and as reasoning for her ironclad support of colonialism and genocide. Once again, those who had chosen to work to bring change from within the system hit a wall and were forced to face the limitations of the inside electoral strategy for bringing change to conditions in Palestine. That wall, one present within efforts to pressure and extract wins from Harris, the squad, and the system at large, is the problem. This wall is not a bug, but a feature, a defensive element of a system hell-bent on avoiding change of any real kind beyond a narrow threshold. It presents a limitation to organizers who see themselves as being able to build power and make large-scale structural changes through existing institutions and bodies. This is also a reality that should lead those on the left to question the efficacy of electoral politics as a strategy for building power. It is no surprise then that Palestine has been the issue to make clear the limitations of such actors in the system they operate in. Palestine represents the tip of the spear of anti-imperialist struggle and is a direct challenge to U.S. interests at home and abroad. The Palestinian liberation struggle has been made into a political hot potato and a system that incentivizes electoral officials to view their options based on the calculations of short-term electoral viability. Principled solidarity ultimately becomes antagonistic to the goal of re-election and even antagonistic to the coalition-building efforts and political maneuvering so many elected officials commit to their counterparts, progressive and otherwise, efforts that allow them to bring home wins in their district. The reality is that even the most well-meaning progressives, by merit of their position within the imperial core, ultimately work towards self-interest and the interests of the imperialists, colonial entity they represent. This often takes the form of political pragmatism in an effort to maintain their place of power and authority within that oppressive system. But it is oppression that is replicated nonetheless. That is not to say electoral struggle has no value. While the power that is built through the electoral victories often appears more hypothetical than actual concessions or wins principled socialists, organizers, and organizations have extracted from their elected officials, there is no doubt that on a local level, electoral efforts can have real, immediate, and positive changes and positive effects. And Regardless of material victories, electoral efforts also give organizers a key arena within which they can sharpen contradictions, showing the real shortcomings of a system so many legitimately see as a means for change and improvement. Win or lose, participation in electoral endeavors gives principled organizers a chance to pull the curtains down and show their communities the wall as it exists, and the deep imperfections of even the most progressive political leaders. In regards to Palestine, that is where the true power lies. Principled organizers, by standing arm in arm with the liberation struggle, are exposing the imperialist beast that is the U.S. for all to see as our government continues to bare its fangs to squash dissent and facilitate the murder and suffering of millions for all to see. But the limitations of an electoral strategy should be clear to all by this point, and ultimately, it is a question of what our goals are for engaging in it. The liberation of Palestine and our collective liberation will not be achieved in the halls of Congress. It's simply impossible to obtain liberation through an institution that is built on genocide, colonialism, white supremacy, and imperialism. But the failures of such an institution that are brought to the forefront through organizers dedicated to showing its real nature will advance the movement, and in the process build real power as we organize for an alternative to our status quo. Organizers across the U.S. have been committing to actions that are bringing us closer to our goals, in spite of these electoral mishaps. Countless organizations and individuals have taken up boycott campaigns in their communities, building ties with those around them as they push to end the sale of Israeli products, creating apartheid-free zones in the places they call home. Some have taken to efforts that pressure the companies complicit in the production and supply of arms to the Israeli military, like that of the Palestinian Youth Movement's Mask Off campaign, or efforts by BDS. My brain still goes to BDSM. Here we go. Or efforts by BDS Boston and other organizers to rid Cambridge of a local Elbit facility. Others have also taken to target divestment campaigns against BDS targets like Chevron. This has been bolstered by the efforts of countless rank-and-file union members and organizers who are working to pass BDS resolutions and other pro-Palestine efforts and bring the power of organized labor onto the side of Palestinians. The examples are countless. Kamala Harris, Jamal Bowman, AOC, Bernie Sanders, these people will not be the leaders in any liberation struggle.
Mm.
They are at best occasional, convenient allies and tools, and at worst, oppositional to their very cause we cherish and champion. That's sad about Bernie Sanders, though, because I know he's actually been arrested for stuff too. He actually wanted those changes, but I think at this point he's done it for so long. He's just it's not going to change. I give up. It is on us to stop dying on the hill of coming to their defense and commit to the strategy and tactics that will move us forward.
Yeah, see the joke. Vote Joel's time.
Vote Joel's time. And vote at the local level. This is from Haaretz. Whether Harris or Trump, the U.S. won't fix Israel and Palestine. Kamala Harris may have won the presidential debate against Donald Trump, but she didn't even try to explain how she would break the impasse on the Gaza war. A Trump presidency would be even more disastrous. The only way out is for Israel itself to want to change direction. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Things change real fast.
Well,
Things can change really fast.
they can, but if people are in the streets wanting their people let out for the horrible atrocities that they
It could
did
have
to
been a
another
very
person,
loud minority. But yeah, when you poll Israelis, it's not very...
it was one of their largest protests.
Yeah.
So, fuck them. But yeah, fuck them. Fuck the Israelis. Fuck the Zionist Israelis. Fuck all Zionists. Fuck it.
Fuck Zionists.
Fuck Zionists.
First-term presidents can be terrible at foreign policy. In Bill Clinton's first term, not one but two horrible genocides occurred, in Bosnia and Rwanda. Alongside the U.S. debacle in Somalia, the former governor of Arkansas had little foreign policy savvy.
Well, that's because you got someone from Arkansas. What did you expect?
George W. Bush also came out of state politics, serving 5 years as governor of Texas.
Yeehaw.
September 11th struck early in his first term. In response, he launched the war in Iraq, displaying primitive foreign policy judgment. That war became one of the most disastrous policies in modern U.S. history. It was bad for Iraq, the Middle East, and bad for the world.
It's we did not minimize civilian casualties, and we didn't do all the good stuff either.
Mm-hmm.
We did stupid shit.
Yep. If Kamala Harris wins in November, she too could fall in the first-term foreign policy rut, despite having accrued more on-the-job experience than her recent predecessors as vice president. But judging from the debate this week and the 4 paragraphs on foreign policy in her campaign platform, it's hard to expect anything stellar, at least in the Israeli-Palestinian arena. After all, she has gained her most extensive foreign policy experience in President Joe Biden's White House, which took a lackluster approach to Israel and Palestine before the war. The aim of the administration pre-October 7 was mainly to keep the Middle East off the table so that the president could focus on China. In practice, that meant letting Benjamin Netanyahu's government race ahead with annexation while continuing Israel's chokehold on Gaza. It also meant that the United States accepted the notion that reviving a two-state peace process would be a costly political failure. Since October 7 and the subsequent Gaza war, the administration has been rich on moral and rhetorical fervor. At points, Harris has been in the forward position of calling openly for a ceasefire or critiquing the inconceivable destruction and death in Gaza. She repeated these lines dutifully during Tuesday's debate. She would be committed to Israel's security and its right to self-defense, but the war must end and the hostages must return. She reiterated her support for the two-state solution, also arguing that Palestinians require security, dignity, and self-determination. Her words were correct, but the voice was that of ChatGPT, repeating her stirring speech at the recent Democratic National Convention, but with less gusto.
Yeah, it did seem like it was definitely not actually supposed to be included, in changing Palestine, because she was like, no, Israel can kill them all. We'll give them arms. We're going to keep giving them arms. And then she's like, but they deserve to be a people. Like, somebody forgot to take that part out of your speech. Like, somebody messed up somewhere, bro.
It makes strategic sense that she wanted to keep this inflamed issue contained in the debate against Donald Trump. The Biden administration has so far failed in the most important aims of this war on the Israeli-Palestinian front, namely a ceasefire and a hostage release deal. That's probably because, for the sake of those aims, the administration has invested mainly diplomatic time and talk, sprinkling tepid policy warnings to Israel in the form of sanctions against a few individuals and select organizations in the West Bank, and a slowdown of one arms shipment. But the administration has showered support on Israel for continuing the war with weapons, financial aid, and political cover in international forums. The administration has been more successful in deterring a full-on regional escalation, which is good, but not good enough for Gazan civilians or Israeli hostages dying by the hour.
Well, I mean, the Israeli hostages probably wouldn't die if Israel wasn't bombing them.
True. Given the low bar and the increasingly brazen opposition to the two states in the Israeli government, it's not a bad thing for Harris to reiterate support for the two-state solution. Neither Biden nor Secretary of State Anthony Blinken seem eager to say these words to themselves in recent months. But this is where we are. The two-state solution has been official U.S. policy for over 20 years. We all know the aim. What we don't know is how to get there. On Tuesday, the debate moderators asked Harris how she planned to break the impasse on the war, and she didn't even try to answer. In this invasive prefab language, the notion of supporting a two-state solution sounds frankly vacuous. On the other hand, a Trump victory would be disastrous. During the debate, most of the time he sounded dog-eaters deranged. But he also sounded particularly bizarre on foreign affairs. He repeated his recent line that Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if he had been in office. He also regularly said that Hamas wouldn't have attacked Israel on October 7th if he had been president.
That makes no fucking sense, but okay.
The Abraham Accords earlier? Spare us. Trump's policies of showering gifts on Israel and advancing Middle East normalization in order to dispense with the Palestinian situation were among the primary drivers of Palestinian desperation that eventually and predictably exploded. Harris didn't pick a fight over those issues in the debate, not a surprise, but it was disappointing that she didn't challenge him on even the lower-hanging fruit. Trump claimed in the debate that Iran is emboldened under the Biden administration.
Well, she threatened to defend Israel against Iran. So,
I think so is Biden. I mean, basically, they always just say we'll defend Israel. If it comes down to it, yeah.
But I'm saying,
the
like,
USA will come.
they're just like,
ass.
yeah, but they're saying, like, no, we will fuck up at Iran, and then, like, Trump's like,
She knows Iran.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. You know how delusional they are.
how delusional he is.
Yeah, truly. So why did Harris miss the opportunity to excruciate him for this terrible blunder of withdrawing from the JCPOA, the U.S. brokered deal under Barack Obama to limit Iran's nuclear ambitions? The reverberations have contributed contributed to Iran's overall belligerence toward both Israel and the United States, Harris could have used the opportunity to recommit to American diplomacy and to back a signature achievement of a Democratic administration. The likely explanations are that Harris was either too concerned with avoiding controversial headlines or not well versed enough to address the issue with confidence. Both need to change. But the wooden exchange among the candidates over the Middle East revealed a tragic long-term predicament. Anyone supporting an end to this war or a long-term peace expects America to solve it. Negotiations for a ceasefire deal have become a disturbing replica of years of barren negotiations for Israeli-Palestinian peace. The U.S. takes the initiative and then the blame, and we all take its role for granted. Israel, under Netanyahu, the party that holds overwhelming power in this conflict, waits passively for these failures or works to ensure them, presumably hoping that the Americans will stop trying at all. Washington insiders have long quoted George W. Bush, who reportedly quipped that we can't want peace more than the parties themselves. Israel has to want to change. Netanyahu is a lost cause, but if there is an opposition worth its name, it needs to rise up and call for an end to the slaughter in Gaza, the return of the hostages through a deal, the de-escalation of the region, a long-term end of the occupation, and Palestinian self-determination. That's when Israelis will have a true choice between leadership and visions, and if such leaders win, then international diplomacy can actually work. So that's an Israeli newspaper. So when it starts talking about how, like, they're almost on the outside, like the U.S. does everything, and like the Israel just like Netanyahu is always fucking everything up. They're talking from the perspective of Israelis. Yeah, they do hate Netanyahu. A lot of people in Israel do hate Netanyahu. It's just they also want him to stay in power as long as the war is going on, because that's just wartime.
So it works during war, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not on the U.S. to broker a cease still, but it is on the U.S. to stop helping a genocide. Like that's the bare minimum that we are actually asking for. We're not asking you to completely solve every problem in the Middle East. We're just asking you to stop supporting a genocide that's actively happening in
Just
your name
Start following international law
that you
and
helped
you won't
create.
have these problems at all.
Yeah, well, we're fucking hypocrites. So. If they were protesting to end the war
They're powerless.
more often.
Yeah, they're powerless.
I know. It's kind of like a
It's
sport.
like we're powerless in our country too.
No, we pretend that we're not. We pretend that we're free. But
Well, we
never
are
get...
free enough to say this shit. So a lot of people aren't.
Okay, fair enough. There's that. But like, we're not free enough to really make our own life choices. You either work or you starve and are homeless. That's not really having a good choice, is it?
We worship money and we only value monetary value. So, yeah.
And money is gained through inheritance, not through expertise and skills anymore. Another thing. Down with capitalism, up with Palestine.
I mean, if international law were upheld, then the UN would have brokered a deal a long time ago, but we keep on reasserting that a deal can only be brokered by Israel and the U.S. And that's also what Tim Walz supported when he was a congressman.
That's essentially...
on the very many things he supported Israel in his years in Congress.
This is from The Intercept. At DNC, the squad warns Democrats to wake up to the threat of AIPAC. It was Jamal and I this time, said Representative Cori Bush, who was ousted by AIPAC millions. But who is it going to be in 2 years?
Members of the squad are speaking more directly than ever about the role that pro-Israel lobby played in silencing critics of Israel's human rights abuses in Congress, as well as Democrats' complicity. As the Democratic National Convention entered its final day in Chicago, the topic of the war on Gaza and the role of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee in elections have been largely absent from the main stage. No Palestinian speakers got time on the dais, despite the protest efforts from the uncommitted movement this week. Instead, the conversation among Democrats about pushing for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, an end to U.S. weapons shipments to Israel, and the party's role in allowing AIPAC to shape its primaries has been taking place outside the United Center, where progressives held protests to hold convention delegates' feet to the fire, and victims of AIPAC's political campaigns were on hand to add their voices to the demonstrations. Their role in my primary was egregious, Representative Cori Bush, Democrat from Missouri, who was unseated amid an onslaught of millions of dollars from AIPAC, told The Intercept during an interview at the DNC. It was largely deceptive because they were trying to hide their affiliation as far as the reason they needed to run someone against me. But after my opponent won, they wanted to boast a win. AIPAC spent more than $25 million to unseat Bush and Representative Jamal Bowman from New York in primaries this cycle. The outside spending from AIPAC and other pro-Israel groups made the two races the most expensive Democratic House primaries in history. AIPAC's attack ads against Bush concealed the group's sole policy priority is Israel, Bush said. Not one ad spoke about Israel. Not one ad spoke about Palestine, she said. Not one ad spoke about anti-Semitism. The pro-Israel campaigning against members of the squad has largely focused on black members of Congress, Bush, Bowman, and Representative Summer Lee from Pennsylvania, Ilhan Omar, and had all emerged as targets of pro-Israel spending, though AIPAC itself begged out of the latter races. In Bush's race, AIPAC's Super PAC aired an ad that distorted her features by elongating her face, a distortion Bush characterized as racist. They were bigoted, they were racist, and it was allowed, Bush said. If you're not racist, don't do racist things. They have shown themselves to be racist. She pushed back against the idea that the group can't carry out racist campaigning because it backed a black opponent, St. Louis prosecutor Wesley Bell, in her race and a number of other members of the Congressional Black Caucus. To switch out a voice speaking truth to power, Bush said, for someone who is more palatable is what they're doing. The person who ran against me was okay with the lies, she went on, referring to Bell. He would have run on who he is, what he plans to do, and the differences between us. But instead, he did not do that. What he did was deceive the people of the 1st District of Missouri. Democrats should be concerned about AIPAC's role in the party's primaries, Bush said. That was just my race, she said, but what will they do next? Because what they're ultimately trying to do is move Democrats farther to the right.
Oh, they don't have to worry about that.
I want Democrats to realize it was Jamal and I this time, but who is it going to be in 2 years? Bush was not the only member of Congress to speak out against AIPAC at the DNC. Lee and Ramirez from Illinois gave remarks criticizing the pro-Israel lobby at a Wednesday evening documentary screening about Gaza. Both Lee and Ramirez told The Intercept that it was time for the party to realize that spending by outside groups was a threat to all members, not just progressives. The event took place at the historic Grace Episcopal Church, as programming started across the town at the United Center, and delegates and convention attendees awaited speeches from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, former President Bill Clinton, and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Inside the film screening, audience members cried while watching the Fault Lines documentary that recounted the stories of Palestinian families trapped in Gaza. The Rejabs had 7 members of their family, including their 6-year-old daughter Hind, killed by Israeli forces after being trapped in a car for hours. Ramirez told the audience that shortly after Bowman's loss, her colleagues in Congress voted for a bill that negated the numbers of civilian deaths coming out of Gaza. Ramirez said one colleague told her that they voted for the bill because they didn't want outside groups to Jamal them. After the event, Ramirez told The Intercept that the party should be worried about the influence AIPAC is having on its primary elections. Every single Democrat should be concerned that 1 or 2 super PACs were able to concentrate $18 million to take out a Democrat, and that so much of that money came from Republicans, Ramirez said. You put $18 million against Leader Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries, the top House Democrat? He's in trouble. Every one of us is in trouble. What AIPAC did should be criminal.
It should be, because we shouldn't have lobbying groups, because you should be getting support from the people, not from corporations. Also, what a waste of fucking money.
All right, give me $2 million.
Like $18 million just to make sure your candidate wins? Why not put $18 million into your fucking state?
Our state is real.
If they invested $18 million...
It's probably our own money that they're giving back to.
Fair enough. The elections are so blatantly backed and paid for that it's disgusting.
Yeah, our elections are horrible.
Rigged.
They're horrible.
They're rigged against the people.
All the private money, super PACs, corporations, all that shit is fucking horrible. Speaking out, however, can come with a cost, incurring the wrath of AIPAC and its millions. It put a lot of us in a really tough position, Ramirez says. It makes me wonder, how much do I have to raise before I even start collecting signatures again? Because they will do everything they possibly can to make us vulnerable. On an evening stroll after the screening, Lee warned of the influence of big money in general. Money in politics, whoever is putting it in is never your friend, she told The Intercept. AIPAC spent $4 million against Lee in 2022 and failed to recruit at least 2 people to run against her this cycle, The Intercept reported. The same people who are funding AIPAC are the same people who are behind any other corporate interest, any other interest that's against the will of the working class people or marginalized people. When we think about why Corey or Jamal were actually targeted, why me or anywhere else, why we're actually targeted, it's not just about foreign policy, she said. This is less about foreign policy and more about the fact that there's a concerted effort to keep power, to keep influence, to keep democracy out of the hands of communities that have been historically disenfranchised. AIPAC isn't coming into this district and supporting a member because they want them to be able to advance the causes of black people, Lee said. AIPAC has targeted Jewish members of Congress in previous cycles, like Representative Andy Levin. The group also targeted former Representative Mary Newman, whose husband is Jewish. This cycle, AIPAC's main targets have been black members. They're giving money to a politician who will still do their will, who will still advance their policy. So at the end of the day, yes, if you are keeping black districts, black communities from being able to self-determine who they want to represent them, what issues they want at the forefront, then that's racism, she said. It doesn't matter whether you have a black friend. Having a black friend does not make you racist, make you anti-racist. Black districts don't have the money to fight AIPAC's war chest, Lee said. What AIPAC knows is that the Bronx, or Mon Valley, where I'm from, or St. Louis and Ferguson, those communities don't have 20 million sitting in them. They know that, and that's the reason why they come into those districts. The threat facing Democrats isn't just coming from AIPAC, Lee said. It's an arms race. It's AIPAC today, it's whoever else tomorrow. There will always be another super PAC tomorrow, because once you create the blueprint, once you pull out the gun, you can't put it back in the holster. Lee said Democrats need to pick a side. If we don't put the stop to this, if we don't lead people in a different direction, we will lose our democracy. Not because of Trumpism and MAGAism. We will lose our democracy because none of us were courageous enough to stand up to the influences that are undemocratic. Oh yeah.
I just fucking hate AIPAC. That's all. Don't even want to talk about them, you know?
Yeah.
I wish they would be demolished as a group. Not.
They should not have lobbyists at all.
Yes.
Special interest in that at all. It should be nothing but the people.
Nope, it's about how much money you have. And that's what it's always about, is how much money you have.
How much money your company has. Yeah. This is from Common Dreams. Very bad sign for democracy. AIPAC has spent over $100 million on 2024 elections. AIPAC's billion-funded Super PAC has helped defeat two of the most vocal opponents of Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip.
The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a powerful lobbying group widely known as AIPAC, has officially spent more than $100 million in 2024 election cycle so far, pouring staggering sums into Democratic primary races in an effort to unseat progressive opponents of Israel's war on the Gaza Strip. Citing new Federal Election Commission filings, Sludge reported Tuesday that AIPAC's Political Action Committee had spent $44.8 million as of the end of last month, mostly on donations to political campaigns and party organizations. The United Democracy Project, UDP, AIPAC's Super PAC, has spent $55.4 million so far, bringing AIPAC's total spending this cycle to just over $100 million, surpassing its reported spending target for 2024 races. AIPAC money has already made a significant impact, helping a pair of pro-Israel Democrats defeat progressive reps Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, two of Congress's most vocal critics of Israel's assault on Gaza in recent primary contests. Sludge noted that UDP's financial support for Bowman's primary opponent, George Latimer, set a record for spending by an outside group on a House election. A very bad sign for democracy that MAGA billionaires are spending this much money to shape our politics, the youth-led Sunrise Movement wrote in response to the new spending figures, referring to the Republican megadonors who have fueled spending by AIPAC-aligned groups. Politico reported in June that AIPAC has been the biggest source of Republican money flowing into competitive Democratic primaries this year. Sludge pointed out Tuesday that billionaire Jan Koum, the former WhatsApp CEO who helped bankroll Nikki Haley's failed presidential bid, is the top donor to AIPAC's Super PAC. Other UDP donors in recent months have included the following: David Messer, CEO of FreePoint Commodities, who gave another $250,000 on July 1st, Martin Geller, CEO of financial firm Geller & Company, who gave an additional $268,000 on June 25th, and Frank Ware, equity portfolio manager at Capital Group, who gave an additional $200,000 in May, Sludge reported. While laminating the outsized influence that UDP and other billionaire-funded groups are able to wield in the U.S. political system, some observers have argued that AIPAC's aggressive spending is a sign of desperation in the face of growing public opposition to Israel's mass atrocities in Gaza. A majority of Democratic voters view Israel's war in Gaza as genocide, according to one recent survey. Supporting Palestinian rights is becoming so popular among American voters that pro-genocide groups have to spend over $100 million to hold on, said Beth Miller, policy director at Jewish Voice for Peace. I don't like the way she said that.
Supporting Palestinian rights is becoming so popular amongst Americans, it's the latest trend.
I don't like how she said that. I don't like the verbiage for that one.
Hmm.
It's becoming so popular. You mean supporting
just the-
Palestinian rights
it's
is a
just the
humane
correct-
thing to do?
It's the correct position. Yeah.
Fucking stupid.
Yeah, we shouldn't have lobby groups at all. We shouldn't have special interests.
I thought we weren't like allowed to have that. Like I thought that was against part of like, I don't know, the way our elections were
Not
supposed to
since,
go.
Reagan, Citizens United, a few other decisions that really fucked us politically.
Was him deciding that it was okay for outside groups to control our politics. That's smart.
That's the national security issue. If other countries have control of our government, that's a national security issue.
Oh, but do you see them doing a fucking thing about it?
No.
Do you see them ever doing
pockets
anything?
are lines. They don't give a fuck.
This is from The Hill. The misguided laws contributing to America's rural health crisis.
America's rural health crisis has gone from bad to worse. More than 90% of rural counties face a shortage of primary care physicians, forcing many rural residents to travel for hours, even for basic procedures. Over the last 2 decades, nearly 200 rural hospitals have shut down. Hundreds more hospitals teeter on the brink of bankruptcy, threatening to deprive millions more of people of the vital nearby care. In fact, a lack of adequate access to healthcare has contributed to the widening health gap between rural and urban Americans. From 2010 to 2019, while life expectancy rose in urban counties, it declined in rural parts of the country. In 2020, for example, rural counties experienced higher than average COVID-19 death rates. And in newly released research in the Southern Economic Journal, we show that misguided government policies are pouring fuel on this fire. We study certificate of need laws, which require healthcare providers to obtain approval from state officials before offering new services, expanding facilities, or investing in technology. Currently, con laws exist in 35 states. A large amount of evidence shows that these regulations limit competition and drive up prices in the healthcare industry. But our study is one of the first to examine their impact on rural America. Some policymakers insist by controlling where additional health services can be offered, they can direct providers to invest more in geographically remote and undeserved areas. Without con laws, the argument goes, profit-hungry providers would solely focus on urban centers. For example, the West Virginia Healthcare Authority, the agency that oversees the state's con program, argues, in West Virginia, the con program offers some protection for small, often financially fragile, rural hospitals and the underinsured population they serve by promoting the availability and accessibility of services. The Kentucky Hospital Association has made similar claims, warning that repealing con laws would be another nail in the coffin for rural communities.
It'd be simple. Get rid of con laws and make healthcare free for all. Because the problem is the hospitals aren't getting their money because people are uninsured or underinsured, and so the hospitals lose money. So it all goes back to if universal healthcare was a fucking thing, hospitals wouldn't have to shut down.
They wouldn't be running on a profit motive. They would just be available where they're needed.
And the bad thing about running on a profit motive, specialists who have very high ratings for something, let's say along the lines of a cancer specialist, if they have high ratings, understand that the reason they have those high ratings is generally because there hasn't been deaths at their hospital. And so when they get deaths, it loses them money, but if they help people, they will get the money. If you're terminal and they know that they can't help you and they know that you will die, they will just not accept you as a patient because it will look bad on their numbers. So that means that people that are in end of life that need care, that could, there are people that have had stage 4 cancer and fucking beat it. But to turn away somebody that's at stage 4 because you think it could hurt your rating, that's against the Hippocratic Oath. It's against basic morals and the whole point of hospitals.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a profit motive in the pursuit of life, happiness, or death.
Or health, or education.
Yeah.
Or just living in general.
They should just be the rights of humans.
Not in this country.
However, this narrative could simply serve as a pretext for existing hospitals to keep potential competitors out of their areas. In many states, the con application process is lengthy and expensive, placing a considerable burden on smaller and newer providers. In contrast, larger and more politically connected organizations are usually more adept at navigating all the bureaucratic procedures.
Correct. So also when you have those big hospitals and you have somebody that works there and they realize that, let's say it's a profit motive, so they want to, branch out and open their own office and do their own private practice. Now they have to go through and get everything situated, not just to open on its own, but also to accept people's insurances. And that's just a whole other step and a whole other mess that a lot of private practices run into that there might be a lot of private practices, but your insurance won't let you go there.
I'm sure the contributing factor to hospital closures is insurance companies denying claims.
Oh yeah, for sure. And them charging an arm and a leg to give you a Band-Aid. That's also a problem.
$500 to hold your kid after you poop it out.
Even though they tell you that you have to do that,
Mhm.
you have to.
You have to
It's
do
medically,
skin, but we're
it's
gonna
medically
charge
going to
you money.
help.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
$50 for a tissue.
And then they put it in an incubator anyway.
Yeah. No. To test these competing theories, we analyzed nearly 30 years of data focused on 5 states: Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, that have repealed con restrictions on hospitals since the early 90s. Relative to states that kept their con laws in place, these 5 states experienced a 3.4% increase in rural hospitals per capita in the years after repeal. Nationally, they would translate to roughly 70 additional hospitals serving rural patients.
See, I don't understand how we have data and stuff that proves that something works, and we're still just like, nah.
Yeah. Instead of deepening healthcare shortages in rural areas, repealing con laws led to more access to hospital services. Moreover, we find that repealing con laws increased the number of hospitals in urban areas too, indicating that these laws are restricting beneficial competition in all areas of the country. Con laws deter new hospitals from forming, and by doing so, exacerbate the rural health care crisis. Established hospitals are highly incentivized to derail the con applications of potential competitors to protect their turf, and hospital associations lobby aggressively to keep these protections in place.
So fucking disgusting.
Maureen Aholason, a former commissioner of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, put it bluntly: con laws serve primarily, if not solely, to assist incumbents in fending off competition from new entrants. Our research supports this claim. If policymakers want to address the crisis, repealing these anti-competitive, anti-healthcare consumer laws would be a good place to start.
Nah, it's too much money that's paying for against that.
We experienced this ourselves in small town. So. This is from MedCity News: the challenges of providing healthcare in rural areas.
The lack of proper healthcare infrastructure, human resources, equipment, and funding can reduce the quality of care in rural hospitals and clinics. It's crucial to improve the rural healthcare delivery models and provide quality care to the residents. Typically, hospitals in rural areas are much smaller than the ones we see in bigger cities. Regardless of their size, rural healthcare plays a significant role in keeping the communities healthy and sound by offering emergency care for people. Sometimes they collaborate with urban health systems to provide specialized and primary care. Although rural health professionals can provide urgent, quality, and compassionate care to the people there, obstacles still complicate things for patients seeking rural care, because in many cases, rural care isn't enough for the patient's needs. Over 60 million Americans, 1/5 of the U.S. population, are rural residents. Many of them are older and have severe health conditions. Therefore, they require more medical attention and care wherever they are. However, in many rural areas, people have limited access to healthcare services, including minimal specialized care. Many local hospitals in rural areas are seeing closures. Residents must travel long distance to seek even the standard services in the nearest hospitals. They might need to travel further to find specialized services like substance abuse treatment. Due to socioeconomic issues, we might see many rural residents have no insurance coverage, which prevents them from accessing the care they need. In rural America, a shortage of healthcare professionals presents significant challenges. Here are key reasons and potential solutions. Cost of medical education. High medical school costs deter doctors, especially when primary care roles in rural areas offer lower salaries. Limited job opportunities. Fewer healthcare facilities in rural areas means fewer job openings for healthcare professionals. Scarcity of resources. Poor healthcare resources and facilities make comprehensive care difficult. Recruitment and retention struggles. Rural healthcare providers find it hard to attract and keep staff, leading to burnout and staff shortages. Negative consequences. Doctor shortages result in longer wait times, reduced care quality, and limited specialist access. To improve rural healthcare, support networks, establish support systems through telehealth and mentorship, specialized training, provide training for rural-specific challenges like telehealth and chronic disease management. Government initiatives. Offer financial initiatives for rural practices and improve infrastructure with broadband access and reliable transportation. Rural areas lack technology and telemedicine. Technology and telemedicine significantly improve healthcare delivery, especially in rural places when resources and opportunities are scarce. Rural doctors can use telehealth to connect with other doctors for advice, receive training, and improve health outcomes. But often, rural areas don't have access to high-speed internet required for telemedicine services. Rural residents do not own smartphones in some areas, which is crucial to accessing telehealth services. All state requirements for telehealth licensing and credentialing aren't the same, so it can make things difficult for healthcare providers who wish to provide care through telemedicine. Similarly, reimbursement policies for telehealth are different from state to state. Lack of modern technology may also make it difficult for doctors to exchange electronic health information in rural areas. Rural residents may be skeptical about the quality of telehealth services or concerned about their data security and privacy. However, all these problems can be solved by taking a few measures over time. Stakeholders should fund telehealth programs, expand reimbursement policies, and create awareness of telehealth services to encourage rural residents. The lack of proper healthcare infrastructure, human resources, equipment, and funding can reduce the quality of care in rural hospitals and clinics. It's crucial to improve the rural healthcare delivery models and provide quality care to its residents. It's why the government, investors, healthcare providers, and every other healthcare stakeholder should focus more on healthcare education and awareness while addressing the challenges related to infrastructure and resources.
Yeah, so we live in a rural area, and it's hard to find good doctors that know what they're talking about. Will listen to you, and respect you.
Help you.
And
Help you in a
treat
timely manner.
treat you like a patient instead of like a drug seeker or something. It's hard to find decent doctors. The nurses don't want to be there. The receptionists don't want to be there. They're all arguing with the people in the lobby with each other. It's a common occurrence every time. We don't go places often, and it seems like every time we do, there's a kerfuffle.
Just like if I die, it's SIH's fault.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna die.
They were gonna leave. One of my relatives had kidney failure. They were gonna leave her bad kidney inside of her. And it gave an infection that went to her brain. She had to go to a city doctor, and they took the kidney out, and she's fine now.
Before they even did that, they also made her undergo multiple unnecessary surgeries in an attempt to save what was already unsalvageable.
I mean, she was in a catheter for 6 months. She had putting tubes in and out of her. Like, why? Why put her all through all that suffering? And
brain damage.
When a savvy doctor knows exactly what you should do, it's just. Yep.
Yeah. In the past 2 months, we've been to the ER 4 or 5 times. And I've seen my doctor at least a dozen, including a telehealth appointment. And I'm still in pain, and I still don't know why.
Like, you can't figure out what's wrong with her.
It's getting harder to walk,
Like,
to stand.
it's so frustrating. It's just like all the services in the rural area are half-assed, and the people around here are the ones that provide the services. They're small town people. I mean,
So there's no rush on anything. And appointments are months out. It took me 6 months to see a rheumatologist. And that was after a year of trying to get my provider to refer me to one. So.
And when we first got in this area, our primary doctor was someone who we liked, and he even told PD that he was going to the VA because they were going to cut his pay at SIH by 30%. So, like, we're dealing with doctors who aren't
even being paid adequately.
Yeah,
so
and you expect
them to care.
the good health outcomes? I don't think so.
It's hard to care when you're not making enough money and you're slaving away at something.
And it's the center of the issue is the profit motive. There should be no profit motive in healthcare. It should be nationalized. It should be governed by the people.
I can't get a testing
with
done.
our
that I
best
need.
interest in mind at all times.
I can't get testing done that I need because they keep running into issues with my insurance.
They don't even know how to deal with the insurance. It's the simplest shit ever. We had to do most of the stuff ourselves. We had to like get it like simple shit, fax shit to here. Send a fucking email here. It's like I have to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they have their own thing, but it gets frustrating, and after a while, you just have to.
Well, I understand that everybody has their bad days, and that's understandable. But when it's every time, when I'm messaging you on the message board and you don't send it to my provider because you don't think it's necessary. And I'm begging you to do anything because I'm in so much pain. Give me
Right.
anything. I don't care. You give me Tylenol. I don't care. I need something else. Just tell me what else will make this stop.
We'll probably have to go to the city to have you to get a doctor's look because it seems that all the doctors around here just are clueless. I don't understand.
I can't wait for this to be done. And you know, every time they're like, "Oh, we're going to schedule you an appointment for this testing," you get this moment of hope because I'm going to finally figure out what's wrong with me. I'm going to have an answer, and then we can get it taken care of. I don't have to be in pain anymore. I can just go back to my life as it was. And then they call you and they tell you, "Oh, we're having an issue with the insurance. We're going to reschedule you a month out." And then they call again the day before the appointment again to say, "Oh, sorry, we're having an issue with the insurance. We're going to schedule you another month out."
Dude, let's get back to work, dude. It's crazy. She even told them how the fuck to do it because she's in this industry. They told them how to run the insurance. Don't run it through the primary, run it through the secondary. And it worked. And they came back the next month and said the same exact shit, dude. They don't give a fuck. They just want us to die.
And when I explained it to her and got frustrated and raised my voice, she hung up on me. And then she canceled my appointment the morning of the appointment. And then she called my primary and had my primary nurse call me to tell me not to go to the appointment.
Little bitch. We're
That's what I'm
fucking
doing.
need help.
Dude, like, for real.
It's like when I had a kidney stone when I first got here, and they referred me to urology. I go to urology. The nurse is a total cunt. She didn't have something from. I used to live in Kansas City, so like, they needed some from Kansas City, and they expected me to provide it. And I'm like, what do you mean? So you can't like fax the shit? You can't email the fucking photos? Like what is your fucking? And I say to her like, I don't understand how it's my responsibility to just like be your middleman for the professional health people. And she was a total cunt. She laughed at me. She scoffed at me the entire rest of the time. I left the appointment and I never went back. I never figured out my kidney stone or anything just because they are incapable of getting anything done correctly. Like, why the fuck would I even let you? Like,
I get you hate your job. And again, everybody has their bad days, but understand that this has been a continual thing for us.
It's like every time we interact with these people, with the healthcare, with the state, with insurance, with work, they're all just trying to fuck us. It's like the moment they think that you're useless, they just treat you that way. They treat you like we're worthless. The moment you have an ailment, the moment that they can't make the fucking value on it like a fucking dime, you're done. You're over. It's capitalism.
Yep.
Get another fucking job. You think it's so easy. Yeah. Fucking economy's bullshit, dude. Other fucking service jobs, a gig economy. Fuck you.
I just don't want to be in pain anymore. I didn't think that was too much to ask. That's all I want. I can use a Band-Aid until you figure shit out. I'm fine with a Band-Aid right now. Band-Aids aren't permanent. You can work on getting everything else figured out while I have my Band-Aid and can continue my life, but I can't even get a Band-Aid.
They don't make the shit anymore. They don't make actual painkillers anymore. You have to take a fucking NSAID that's a fucking on steroids, or take a steroid, or take a fucking Toradol. They don't give shit for what? I'm just gonna fucking scream. So.
You're just getting angry.
Because I was gonna talk about how one of my managers I used to work for, her son was like 6, and he broke his arm on his bicycle. They took him to the ER. They wouldn't give him hydrocodone because he's 6. He's screaming in pain, and his fucking bones coming out, and they won't give him hydrocodone because he's obviously a fucking drug seeker.
Yep. Under the age of 12, they're not.
I'm not sure if it was hydrocodone. They wouldn't give him pain medicine. But I'm sorry.
They wouldn't give him anything for pain. Yeah, that was ultimately what it was. Just like I broke my arm when I was a little kid, and yeah, they injected me with something in my hip that made me go night-night. So I don't even know what it was. I just remember the shot hurt more than my arm. First time I ever got a shot in my hip. Fucking, oh man, it's not fun.
I had a few, but they never seem to incapacitate me.
Well, you've seen how many I've had lately.
Like you don't understand though. Like I've been held down, give Thorazine shots. I've been held down, give shots in my back, and I just get right back up afterwards. And I'd have like even a few times like one of the like people that work there like take me aside like, bro, just lay down for 30 minutes, please just lay down for 30 fucking minutes. Like they were begging me. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing wrong, guys. Like, what do you? I don't even know why you're giving me the shot. Like, I'm just confused, ill person. But yeah, it never seemed to do anything to me.
Thorazine?
Thorazine, whatever the fuck else to give the shot in the back. I don't fucking know. They just hold you down and put like 3 shots in your back. Did you get that?
They didn't hold me down, but I mean, you see me at the hospital and stuff. Pretty much anytime they're like, "We're gonna give you a shot," I'm like, "Okay," and they're like, "No, in your butt," and I'm just pulling my pants down. Like, just fucking do it. Like, I am afraid of needles. Understand that. I am terrified of needles. I can't even look at them, or I will start freaking out. But every time they're offering me anything, I'm just like, "Now, where do you want to give it to me? In my ass? Fuck it. Stab my ass. I don't give a shit. Just fucking make it stop." It doesn't work.
Niggas living with pain is debilitating. It's
I'm so
on the
tired.
front of your mind all the time. Every step you take. It's just
Every hug.
chronic. It's chronic. It's chronic illness.
I'm just so tired.
This is from the New York Post. Snowflakeism. Gen Z hires are easily offended and not ready for the workplace, says business leaders.
I'm sorry, your old asses aren't ready for Gen Z. That's what it is. Gen Z employees are entitled, too easily offended, lazy, and generally unprepared for the workplace, according to their bosses. The dismal assessment of workers born between 1996 and 2010 comes in a poll of 966 business leaders across the country taken last month by the online education magazine Intelligent.com. The survey found 75% of executives felt most of the recent college grads they hired were unsuccessful. 60% said at least some of them had to be fired. Sounds like board management to me. The supervisors, who ranged from C-suite executives and business owners to senior and human resources managers at companies with more than 10 employees, said they'll refrain from hiring Gen Z workers in the coming year. That blows my mind. That part blows my mind. How can you say that?
You like how a company full of boomers you complain about dumbass shit?
I mean, how can
They'll never complain about their. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess you just never expect any of your employees currently to like die or move on, you know? Like, how are you going to shut down a whole fucking generation? Like, you were born in 1996, you went to college, you have 2 master's degrees? Nah, you're not qualified. Like,
Yeah.
bro, what?
This is a bunch of bullshit.
It's kind of funny in a way. They're just fucking themselves over by not having an entire generation of workforce. Like, you're just hurting your own business, yo. With Gen Z, they've got a ton of access to information, a lot of different content, news sources, and influences, said Hai Nguyen, Chief Education and Career Development Advisor for Intelligent, and a former Fortune 500 hiring manager. So when they go into a company that has more traditional norms, you get a situation where it doesn't always mesh, he told the Post. You mean Gen Z won't let you slap their fucking ass and like make inappropriate comments and jokes about them? Go fucking Gen Z. Why did we deal with it? About 17% of leaders believe Gen Z, who range in age from their teens to about 28, is often too difficult to manage. And 39% said they have poor communication skills. No, they just don't want to talk to you. Also, when you act like you're not, when you don't act like a boss, when you act like you're literally like in control of them in their entire lives, even when they're not there working for you, then yeah, they're not going to communicate. Like, how many people are terrified to call into work?
Pretty much everyone.
Because your job makes you feel like shit for it. You call and tell them that you have a family member that died, and they're like, "Can you come in tomorrow?" No, I can't. Well, your mom died. We'll give you 3 days off. You should be over it by then. Like, the fuck? What are you doing? I'm glad Gen Z sees this shit and is like, we need better.
Like my former boss, his wife died of a heart condition, and he left for a week, and they were threatening to fire him if he wasn't coming back.
A week is not enough time to get over your
To grieve
spouse.
your significant other.
I mean, there's never enough time, but like a week, like it's just not.
Yeah.
How do you do it? How can you look somebody in the eye
You
and say that to them?
gotta be the sociopath employer. Like, just make your fucking money. That's all you care about. That's what
Boomers.
most of them care about. That's what, all they care about, most of them.
That's I hate how valid that is. It'd be nice if people were more compassionate.
It'd be nice if people seen people's value other than just in a monetary sense.
Justin James, an international entrepreneur, business mentor, and speaker, said some Gen Zers struggle to articulate themselves, don't look you in the eye, and don't project their voices. They lack charisma and personality skills, he told the Post, adding, "I don't feel they are in tune with what it takes to impress others."
Oh, please.
You mean they don't like They don't work every time that you call them. They don't work all the overtime that you try to force on them. They call into work sick. They take their vacation days. They care more about their lives than they do about your company, and that's the fucking problem with you.
Yes, the entire life dedicated to work.
Like, I don't even understand all of Gen Z, but it's a whole fucking generation of people. How do you do that? Fuck it. I don't want boomers in the office anymore. I don't want some 85-year-old looking down my shirt.
It's okay to be ageist if they're young.
James has seen what he calls snowflakeism, some Gen Zers crumbling under even a little pressure. It's almost like you have to walk on eggshells around them, being super sensitive when managing them, in case you offend them, upset them, push them too far, he said. Some 20-somethings have even brought a parent with them to job interviews for support. Corporate environments and office culture have relaxed in recent years and are viewed differently between generations. But even with a more laid-back office environment, recent college grads don't dress professionally and don't use appropriate language for work. 19% of those surveyed said. A lot of the... What does that mean they don't dress appropriately for work? Do you mean they dress...
Casual.
So do they dress like more comfortable, like, you know, like they should be? Or do they dress like in tube tops and mini skirts? Like, what do we mean by inappropriate and not appropriate?
Do you have a dress code?
A lot of these responses matched up with general stereotypes of how people talk about Gen Z in general. While some of the beliefs are subjective, others are not, he said, like being on time. About 20% of respondents said Gen Zers are often late to work, and 15% said they frequently hand assignments in late. The younger generation is also more likely to use up their sick days than their older colleagues, recent studies have found. But many bosses are trying to tame the immature hires, even mandating office etiquette training.
You guys want to make them want to work for your shitty ass more?
It's just... it's because the older generation has been taught not to use your sick days, that it's bad to use your sick days unless you're absolutely, like, deathly ill. That's kind of what we've had, you know, like, beaten
Sick days,
into
I've never
us.
had sick day paid.
They make them do etiquette training? You mean CBLs? You mean the little tests that you make everybody do on the computer?
Mm-hmm.
The one that nobody pays attention to? These people are so out of touch, it's unreal.
For real. It's like they've never been an employee before.
54% of the company leaders surveyed said they offer the training and many mandate it for new hires, and a quarter of them specifically require it for Gen Z recruits. Yeah, that should be against rules because that is ageism. We shouldn't have, that would be like, oh, only the women need to have this training. No, you all have to have it. It's a blanket policy, which means it applies to everyone, not just Gen Z because you don't like the way they talk. I have to be sensitive. I can't make racist jokes around them in the office anymore.
There's also a percentage of baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials that are the same way. So what's your fucking point?
He's a boomer.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
He just wanted to bitch about something. The only thing he can bitch about is his employees that he doesn't even know or doesn't know what they do or wouldn't know how to do their jobs in the first place to the very minimum. Because that's always what there is.
Yeah, it's always your manager doesn't know what the fuck how to do your job. So fuck him.
But yells at you how to do your job.
Why aren't you doing your job right? I don't know how to do it, but yeah.
Why don't you show me? I got something else to do.
Hell, yeah.
Nearly 80% of companies surveyed reported placing at least some of the disappointing hires on performance improvement plans. I've been on those. You know why I've been on those? Because I didn't follow scripting to a T. That's why I've been on the improvement plans. I didn't follow scripting. It's not that I had bad service. It's not that I had people complaining. It's not that, you know, I did anything actually wrong. I just didn't follow a script to a T, and that put me on a performance plan. So
Performance improvement plans. That's
it's
basically where they can nitpick you and
fire you for anything
well, not only that, but like deny your raises and like things like that is
or position changes.
it's their excuse. It's like, well, you didn't get this because of that. Yeah.
How's my performance, guys? Has it improved? Probably not. I'm following the script though. Promise.
You're a floating head.
Adapting to Gen Z, bridging the gap between generations to ensure everyone's success would be a prudent way forward. More and more of them will enter the workforce. They're here to stay. No fucking shit, dude. What do you think they're gonna do?
You're just never gonna hire anyone that's born after 1996.
Don't. Let them find something better. How did I say that?
Well, you know, they watch their parents slave away at the lives that they have now, and you know, a lot of them probably aren't exactly happy with that. So
I mean, a majority of people regardless if you had a 2-parent household, they often had a 1-parent household because one parent was always gone to work. So think about that. Like, you know, in our generation, the people that like never got to throw a ball around in the yard with their dad because he's always working, or you know, mom didn't go to my football game because
Or
she was working.
The grandparents can't ever watch the kids because they work too.
And grandparents working. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what the fuck is that?
That's the boomers complaining about
Yeah.
Gen Z. Yeah.
Let's take boomers out of the damn workforce.
That's how I feel. Yeah. Because they're like, we have to walk on eggshells around them. Like, what do you mean?
Walk around eggshells around your ass.
You can't, make your racist jokes anymore? You can't be
Yeah.
sexist? You can't look a girl down her shirt or grab her ass in the office anymore? And that's the problem? Like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
You are the one that needs training, not Gen Z. Gen Z just needs to keep going. Honestly, as lazy as you might think they are, they just need to keep being that way because they're going to find something better than what we all did.
They're going to give us our first general strike someday.
They don't have to pump out children so they can be your corporate slaves. You know, I mean, I hope Gen Z does better. I hope Gen Z finds better. I hope Gen Z can experience better than what we did, because that's what you're supposed to want. You're supposed to want the next generation to have it
As
better.
a boomer, stop being so fucking selfish and start thinking about the kids.
Yeah, you're gonna die. I'm sorry. I'm gonna die. I think of my children. What are they going to have when I die? What can I provide them with? How can I help them when I'm no longer around to help them? And why the fuck can't the generation that's older than me do that?
Well, fuck all that. Why not? It's basic necessities off the table. I could die happy with that, knowing my kids just have the basic necessities they need for life, and that they can enjoy their life the way they want to.
And not be depressed because they're going in and doing the 9 to 5. Not have anxiety because their boss is always looking over their shoulder.
And doing a job that they fucking hate, don't want to do.
And
Right.
not able to find what they love, what
If
they
you're going to do
dream.
a job that you fucking hate, you better be compensated. That's all I got to say. And they fucking aren't. So why do it? It's not worth the shake.
They're loud enough, even though they're too quiet and can't communicate. You know why they don't look you in the eyes? Because you're intimidating them. Because when you're there talking to them, when you want to talk to them, the first thing in their mind is, fuck,
Maybe they
What did I
realize
do?
the power structure and how much power you have over their life.
I'm going to get fired. It's a terrifying
Yeah.
thought. Every time your boss calls you in the office, the first thought is, fuck,
Because
what did I do?
when you're at work, what do they constantly do? They constantly make you feel like you're replaceable. Nobody wants that. That's the dynamic of nearly every job in capitalism, and it fucking sucks. And we want something better than capitalism.
And we definitely want it for the next generation and the next and the next and the next. Now millennials, now we're getting dragged into it too. You're right, bitch. I don't want to work. I don't want to work for a corporate. I don't want to work for a corporation. I mean,
It's pretty simple.
I don't like I don't like that everything that I do, even when I'm not at work, revolves around work. It's like, you're like, all right, well, as soon as you get off work, now you have to plan for your night to get ready, to go to bed, to go to work. And it's just a continuous cycle. And then it's like, you get invited to go out, but you have to work the next day. So you don't want to go out. You know, it just controls your life. So you're right. We don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to be slaves. We don't want to be depressed. We don't want to have anxiety. We want to be fucking happy. We want to feel fulfilled. We want the earth to survive instead of turning on us because we're poisoning it constantly. Like, it's so,
Yeah, it's simple shit.
it's common sense. And I just think when you hit a certain age, you're just like,
And they know it. They know it. They really do. They fucking know it. It's a lot of people don't realize it.
it's because they're too busy being slaves to the corporations.
The ruling class are very class conscious. Very class conscious.
They took so much money from us. It's ridiculous.
50 trillion since 1970. Are you ready?
They used to not control or have as much as they do. But yeah, recent stock trading scams and all this other bullshit made them take all the power away from the people.
Nixon and Reagan. This is from MSN. Why Gen Z and millennials don't want to work. People can't afford to live, explains TikToker.
Amen. And that is also probably why you see 20-something-year-olds bringing their parent to a job interview with them. It's because they haven't been fairly compensated to be able to live their lives, to be able to purchase their own home, to be able to get married, to be able to start a family if they want to be able to live out their dreams
And
and their
that
lives.
wrecks your fucking confidence.
And so you're stuck living in your mom's basement because you can't pay $1,500 for a one-bedroom studio apartment on a $1,200 a month salary. Duh.
And you're supposed to feel really bad about yourself for that.
Yes, you're supposed to feel like it's your fault and you need to work more jobs.
You need to work 2 or 3 jobs.
If you want to succeed, yeah, of course, you should always be working.
Keeping down by the boot of the man.
You really are, because like you have to have a car. To have a car, you have to have a license. You also have to have car insurance. You have to have that to be able to get a job. But you also need a house to be able to put an address and a bank account to be able to put your money. So if you don't already have those things, you have to do all that first. And then you can go to a job interview where you may or may not get a job with a vehicle that you can't afford. So since you're living in mom's basement, since you're helping mom with bills because her job doesn't pay enough either, you can't afford your own vehicle. You can't afford your own home. You can't afford your own other shit. It's just set up to fail. There's no way to win.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Don't follow the lie. The American dream is dead.
I think it was a mirage for a long time anyway.
True, but it was more believable with the way it was previously. Sorry. I know I kind of went on a tangent there, but they're just so fucking out of touch. The never-ending battle of the generations. Which generation is the most entitled and which is the most hardworking? This is one of the hottest topics on the internet right now. Are the boomers right? Has Gen Z no respect for boundaries and authority? Or are the Zoomers revolutionizing the way we understand work? To put this debate to rest, a woman made a TikTok video about the misconception that the younger generations are lazy. She explained the controversial millennials and Gen Z don't want to work anymore idea. It's not just about laziness. The rising cost of living and stagnant wages are also to blame. Yeah, for real. The TikToker explains, I don't want to work anymore. And now everyone who's not going to watch the full video can go comment about how lazy I am, how lazy my generation is, and how we just don't want to work anymore. And now for those that are still here, I'll explain what we mean by that. I do want to work. If I didn't work, I think I would honestly probably get so bored that I would just want to off myself. Most of us want to work. It helps give you purpose. It helps give you something to do. Hopefully you do something you're passionate about. Luckily for me, I do something I'm passionate about, so I generally like my job. I genuinely like my job. But the problem is, the purpose of a job is supposed to pay for you to be able to afford to live, and that's just not the case anymore. People in my generation who went to college, who did everything they were supposed to do, worked hard in school, went to a good college, graduated with a degree, yada yada, got their first job, and they can't afford to live. And we're working 40 to 60 hours a week on average, and we cannot afford to live. We just do not make enough to pay rent, to pay for food. Everything is so expensive right now, and wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. So we're working full time, giving up a huge portion of our lives to work, and we can't even afford to live. That is why my generation is frustrated. That is why we don't want to work anymore, because we work really hard and we still can't afford to even get by. So what's the point? We can't afford to save. We can't afford to buy things we want. We can't afford to go out and do fun things. We can barely afford to pay our rent and buy food. A lot of us have 2 or 3 jobs or work a full-time job and have several side hustles. That's the case for me. And then older generations just look at us and they're like, you're not working hard enough. This is your fault. You're not working hard enough. The reason we can't get by is because the cost of living since the 90s has gone up 67%, while the wages have only gone up 18%. So wages have not kept up with the cost of living. That's why we can't afford to live. Not because we're lazy, not because we don't work, not because we don't want to work anymore. That is why. That is all. We're also in extreme debt because everything is so much more expensive than it used to be. College is way more expensive than it used to be. Cars are way more expensive than they used to be. Housing, way more expensive than it used to be. And on top of all that, politicians and older generations are destroying our environment, not doing anything to protect it. So we don't even know that there'll be a habitable earth when we're older to live in. So yeah, that makes us pretty pessimistic and nihilistic and not want to work. Experts agree that Gen Z faces unique financial challenges compared to older generations, slowing wage increases, the gig economy, and debt. Well, they agree to it, but they still think you're lazy fucks. The woman in the video, Nick, is right when she says wages have not kept up with the cost of living. Self Financial did a report in 2023 that found the annual salary for U.S. college graduates decreased by over 10% after adjusting for inflation. Graduates earn $68,342 in 1984, $7,254 more than graduates in 2023. And you guys might be like, oh, that's not very much. But you know what? That is. That $7,000, ooh, that's a huge difference, you know? Personal finance site Go Banking Rates writes that today's economic scene has many Gen Z individuals earning wages that don't keep pace with inflation. That's why the current generation sometimes can't afford to pay their rent. Limited affordable housing, rising urban demands, high land and building costs, and zoning laws have pushed up rent prices. Even having 2 or more jobs doesn't always help. Working for Uber or DoorDash can be a great way to earn extra money, but it doesn't constitute a steady income. Fluctuating paychecks can be why some people are not able to pay their rent on a regular basis. Like DoorDash or Instacart, I don't think that those should really be looked at like the way they're looking at it. So they're saying that like fluctuating paychecks can be why some people aren't able to pay their rent. So they're saying that it's your fault because of the job you picked, the job that you were able to get, the job you got hired for, doesn't pay you a regular salary.
If you work 40 hours a week, you should be able to afford to live. Period.
No, I'm talking about how they're talking shit about like.
Oh, I know.
Like,
I'm just saying, like, I don't care about their bullshit. Like, fuck you. That's what I'm saying. Green MAGA.
and the funny thing is that there's other countries that work 32 hours a week at most, and that's their full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
and they can afford to live.
Because they have unions.
And they
Oh,
have to
yeah.
get 17 paid days, vacation days off that they are mandatory to take.
Some have more, yeah.
Like, we're the United States. We love stealing things from people. So why don't we steal all these good jobs?
Number one. Why can't we be number one in the good fucking
The things that
bros, whatever.
the things that show statistically work. Why can't we obtain those? I mean, them doing the non-con,
It's just
and
the Republicans
hospitals.
and the ratchet effect of the last 30 years. It's just completely drawn us away from any kind of conversation on like improving our lives just because they're so entwined with business interests.
Is that along the lines of how you're not allowed to discuss your pay, but actually you are allowed to discuss your pay, but your bosses make it clear that
Yeah, they do a lot of things that they're not supposed to do, but they're basically our tyrants. Whoever you work for is your tyrant.
Mick also mentions how her generation is in extreme debt, and she's right again. One of the biggest factors in young people's poor credit scores is student loans. Shouldn't have credit scores anyway. We should abolish that whole fucking thing.
And abolish student loans and make healthcare or
Education free. Yep. The balances have increased 153% in the last 2 years, and almost 35% of Gen Zers have an outstanding balance. The TIAA Institute and the Global Financial Literacy Center surveyed the financial literacy of 5 generations in the U.S. in 2021. They found that Gen Z lacks knowledge of how to manage their finances the most. Such statistics may sound bleak, but let's also not forget that the younger generations have the most time to make up for their shortcomings. Gen Z is also the generation that is most likely to have participated in a financial education class, according to the survey mentioned above. Resume Builder published a survey on May 15, 2023. In it, 74% of people in managerial positions said they find Gen Z difficult to work with. Young employees clash with their older colleagues because of their different approach to work. One young worker told the New Zealand One News the essence of the Gen Z and millennial work ethic. I should be providing value for you, and I should only want to work for you if you can provide me the value as well. It should go both ways. Yeah, amen to that. The things that the younger generations are demanding are not astronomical changes. 3 out of 4 boomers and Gen Xers also say they care more about who they are outside of work. The difference is that Gen Z and millennials voice their demands to achieve that work and life balance. The younger generations want to know that their boss values the time and effort they put into their work. What's the point of being an invisible cog in a giant corporate machine if you can't even pay for your apartment? That's the question the younger generations are asking.
And they should
Amen to that.
fucking never stop. Fucking scream that shit always.
Make a change.
The kids are alright.
This is from Big Think. Why Albert Einstein was a socialist. We often like to consider the ideas of great thinkers when looking at an issue. To that end, Albert Einstein once wrote an essay explaining why he was a socialist, and we break it down here.
We've discussed before what Einstein thought about God. As he was a brilliant man who thought deeply about many subjects, it can be of great use to learn his perspective on things. While he was a scientist first, his ideas on subjects outside his study can still be valuable, especially if, as in this case, he recognizes his limitations and focuses on general ideas and avoids technical issues. In 1949, Einstein wrote an article for the magazine Monthly Review explaining his thoughts on socialism. In it, he explains his political positions and why he feels the need to weigh in on a subject that is outside the area of his expertise. In this first section of the essay, he acknowledges that he is a man of science and not an expert on economics. He still feels that he is able to offer a few comments on the subject, as socialism is directed towards a social, ethical end. Science, however, cannot create ends, and even less, instill them in human beings. Science, at most, can supply the means by which to attain certain ends. As he doesn't wish to speak scientifically or be overly technical, he argues that a non-expert can make a few points on the subject and begins to do so.
Actually, for a non-expert to have some points on a subject is actually a really good thing, because questioning things is also how we discover new things.
An outside perspective can give you a fresh look on something.
Yeah, like something you missed and then you see it. It's a good thing. Also, Einstein, I know, is a college dropout too, by the way. So he's one of the greatest minds, but he never even received a degree.
Well,
So think about that too, Gen Z. Like, you don't have to have college to follow your dreams. You can do it.
college doesn't make you intelligent. You're already intelligent.
Right. And honestly, more workplaces look at experience at this point than they do at college. If you haven't been in the field for 10 years, they don't give a fuck how many degrees you have.
Yeah. Catch-22. Yeah. Einstein had 3 bones to pick with capitalism. The first is that man is, at one and the same time, a solitary being and a social being. He explains his stance that a person is at once an individual and at the same time rather dependent on society for a great many things. However, despite the necessity of a high-functioning society for our well-being, he sees capitalism as encouraging a mad drive for personal success at the expense of society, and leading us to educate our children in a different way reinforces this behavior. This damages the individual, he argues. It drives us to educate ourselves only to find a job, and not to fully develop beyond that.
Amen.
Furthermore, it can leave the individual in a constant state of fear over the risk of losing their livelihood, which leads to Einstein's second objection. We just talked about that.
It's sad that that is still relevant. Like, that's sad that, yeah, we're still having this kind of a discussion.
80 years later. Yep.
Where
I
we
mean,
wait.
for a long time. Since, yeah. Wait, what? Why did you say where we wait?
Because it's been a long time since that's been going on, too, and we still haven't done shit about that.
Yeah, but like the Supreme Court's never could have,
Let us have abortions. If we don't want a parasite inside of us, we don't want a parasite inside of us.
There it goes. It doesn't matter what we do. Abortion pops up in the Matsup news.
Sorry. If you had a tapeworm, do you want a doctor to tell you that you're not allowed to remove it until it grows big enough? Or do you want that fucking thing out of you? It's a parasite. It's leeching off of you.
I think you can make whatever choice you want with whatever you have in your body. Abortion should be free and legal. Suck these nuts. His second objection is one of waste and inefficiency. While capitalism strives for efficiency, it cannot always make good use of the total body of labor society has to offer. Einstein sees this as a poor way to organize an economy. He posits that there is no provision that all those able and willing to work will always be in a position to find employment. An army of unemployed almost always exists. The worker is constantly in fear of losing his job. Since unemployed and poorly paid workers do not provide a profitable market, the production of consumers' goods is restricted, and great hardship is the consequence. Technological progress frequently results in more unemployment rather than an easing of the burden of work for all.
Also, he was afraid of robots are going to take our jobs too.
Apparently. While it would be most profitable for society at large if total employment was assured, Einstein suggests that capitalism cannot do this on the grounds that it is more profitable for the owners of the means of production, who are often few in number, to not do so. Lastly, he sees the profit motive as a great cause of suffering, like our rural hospitals we were talking about. Going so far as to say that the economic anarchy of capitalist society as it exists today is, in my opinion, the real source of the evil. He explains further than that. The profit motive, in conjunction with competition among capitalists, is responsible for an instability in the accumulation and utilization of capital, which leads to increasingly severe depressions. Unlimited competition leads to a huge waste of labor, and to that crippling of the social consciousness of individuals, which I mentioned before.
That makes sense, because, like, if we weren't in a capitalistic society, you remember that big fucking pile of potatoes that the farmers were just having to dispose of because they just couldn't sell them?
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't be producing that much, or if they were producing that much, that food would go to feed people.
Either in this nation or another.
We do have a lot of waste because things don't sell and we just throw it away.
It's artificial. It's artificial to keep the price the same.
And Einstein saw it. And I'm thinking that maybe finally, it's starting to be seen by the wider general public.
You can only hope. Read Lenin and Marx. His support of socialism comes from the belief that it will solve the problems he finds in capitalism on the grounds that a socialist economy would not be based on a profit motive and would be more oriented towards filling social needs rather than a capitalist economy.
That would make America great.
I am convinced there is only one way to eliminate these grave evils, namely through the establishment of a socialist economy accompanied by an educational system which would be oriented towards social goals. In such an economy, the means of production are owned by society itself and are utilized in a planned fashion. A planned economy which adjusts production to the needs of the community would distribute the work to be done among all those able to work and would guarantee a livelihood to every man, woman, and child. That's communism.
Hey, maybe there wouldn't be child labor since that's become legal again.
When you give the means of production to the community, that's called communism. He wasn't just a socialist, maybe, I don't know.
Shh, that word's dirty.
Yeah. He is careful to note that central planning alone will not be enough. He warns of the risks of a Soviet-style dictatorship and insists that any type of socialism worthy of the name must be democratic and have protections for the personal freedoms we enjoy. The socialism he had in mind was more akin to that of the Western European nations than that of the communist countries.
Ha! He's like, I'm not a commie.
You're not a communist, you just don't like the way they... You're a communist, you just don't like the way they
Have a dictatorship.
organized it, which I kind of agree with them because I also think that the means of production should be in the workers' hands, which in that case, it was in the state's hands, which some people say state capitalism. Fucking around.
Everybody loves to pick on the words that you choose.
Yeah, you know,
Wrong terminology.
yeah.
The left loves picking on the left.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
After his experience fleeing the Nazis, it is perhaps self-evident that he understood the vital need to assure freedom. He was also opposed to McCarthyism and offered to serve as a character witness when W.E.B. Du Bois was accused of being a communist spy. He also worked for civil rights in the United States, was associated with the Princeton chapter of the NAACP, and housed the singer Marian Anderson in his home when she was denied a hotel room in Princeton.
She could have been of a different, what is it called?
Ethnicity.
There we go. She could have been an ethnic singer. That my assumption is she was of a different ethnicity since the hotel denied her. I'm guessing that's probably why. But yeah, I wasn't saying black specifically because I don't know. She could have
That's
been a
segregation in
Hispanic.
Princeton?
That's segregation everywhere.
Oh, it's just a Jim Crow South.
No, segregation was everywhere. It was just worse in the South.
So Einstein is now a masterful economist as well as physicist. His objections are philosophical ones rather than economic ones. His argument that the profit motive leads to depressions and that central planning can solve the boom and bust cycle in an argument which would have made much more sense in 1949 when the problem of market failures was more evident than the problem of planning failures. In any case, his arguments do make valid points which must be considered in any debate. While Einstein was not an economist, he was still a genius who had insights on how the world around him could function better. His endorsement of democratic socialism is well reasoned and done without reservation. Anyone considering why a person might be motivated to support socialism must consider Einstein's arguments as to why a rich, intelligent, and highly successful person would endorse the ideology.
Because he saw that people were suffering.
See, even back then, in the 49, and people understood that capitalism was a boom-bust cycle, that the Great Depression was a result of unfettered capitalism.
And then we've had several other failures of capitalism.
87, 2008,
More recently.
70s, yeah. We're going through one still. It's a boom-bust cycle of capitalism. It's there. It's never going away, and they don't know how to fix it. So
Well, considering
the workers are always ones that feel the brunt of the force too. So like they're always gonna, sorry, I'm assuming shit now, like
What?
you do. So they're always gonna do that. Is what I was gonna say.
always do what?
What was talking about?
Capitalism?
The boom bust. Like, I don't know what I was saying.
They are always going to do it unless they're not the ones in control anymore, which is where Gen Z comes in. Because I don't think the millennials will make a change. If they do, it won't be as big as what Gen Z will.
And probably Alpha, and you got Alpha coming up, but like, I mean, they don't even know what the state capital is. So.
No.
Yeah. Einstein was a smart, successful person, so I guess Ayn Rand was wrong that capitalism, breeds selfish entrepreneurs. They're romanticized, rugged individuals. And
Yeah, no, yeah, she was wrong.